an election. That would be a big foreign policy priority for us.
Pat McFadden speaking to us earlier this morning. Well, in other news, a candlelit vigil has been held for a teenager who was stabbed in north-east London earlier this week. 14-year-old Daniel Angerin was attacked on his way to school by a man with a samurai sword. 4 other people, including 2 police officers, were also injured in the attack. Marcos Monzo, a Spanish-Brazilian dual national, has been charged with murder and attempted murder. A manhunt is ongoing tonight for a prisoner who escaped from jail in Suffolk. Ricky Wall was reported missing in Woodbridge on Saturday morning when he failed to appear for roll call. The 23-year-old serving a 7-year sentence for aggravated burglary. Police are now appealing for help in tracing him. A woman from Essex has been arrested on suspicion of neglect after a 5-month-old boy suffered cardiac arrest at Legoland Windsor Resort. The baby, we understand, remains in critical condition in hospital following that incident. Police have now released the 27-year-old woman on bail and say they're not seeking any other suspects. Detectives, though, are asking anyone with information, particularly those at Legoland's Coast Guard HQ boat ride on Thursday afternoon, to come forward. A man has been arrested on suspicion of organising people trafficking across the English Channel. The 38-year-old, who claims to be an Iraqi, was detained in Preston in the early hours of this morning. It relates to crossings made from France to the UK in November and December of last year. He was detained as part of an investigation into an organised crime network. Israel has rejected a ceasefire deal with Hamas over possible security concerns. The Israeli Prime Minister says the proposal to release hostages in exchange for a ceasefire would leave Hamas intact and therefore Israel unsafe. Benjamin Netanyahu says the terror group's demands are unrealistic. Meanwhile, Israeli police have raided the offices of news broadcaster Al Jazeera in Jerusalem over claims the network is a mouthpiece for Hamas. And finally, before we hand back to Mark, Southern Water has said its supplies are now gradually being restored to more than 32,000 properties in East Sussex. Homes in St Leonards-on-Sea and in Hastings have been without water since a pipe burst there 3 days ago. The damage was repaired yesterday, but the company says services still need to be restarted. Those are the headlines. I'll have another update for you at 10 o'clock. Until then, you can sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you, Sam. A happy bank holiday weekend, one and all. Welcome to a very special and very busy Mark Dolan tonight. In the big story, as Suella Braverman says she regrets supporting Rishi Sunak as leader, and with Dame Andrea Jenkins saying bring back Boris, should the Tories have one more roll of the dice and put someone new in charge? As it's revealed, students are using AI software to write their essays, and with anti-Semitism rife on campus and with free speech non-existent, is there any point in young people amassing debt to go to university? Is higher education worth such a high price? I'll be asking tonight's top pundits. Also, is Britain an institutionally racist country? No, says my Mark Meets guest, Tony Sewell, a prominent man of colour in the House of Lords, whose report on the issue saw him attacked, demonised and stripped of an honorary degree. Cancelled for having the wrong opinions. Lord Tony Sewell joins me shortly. And in my Take a 10 in an hour's time, you won't want to miss this, Prince Andrew needs to get his house in order as the £30 million royal lodge that he inhabits is falling apart. Should King Charles evict his own brother? My verdict on the Playboy Prince at 10. And with me tonight, reacting to the big stories of the day, journalist and communications advisor Linda Jubilee. Former advisor to Boris Johnson, member of the House of Lords, Lord Coolvere Ranger, and campaigner and best-selling author, Chris Wilde. Plus, the most important part of the show, your messages, your views, they come straight to my laptop, gbnews.com/your say. And this show has a golden rule. We don't do boring, not on my watch. I just won't have it. A big 2 hours to come. We start with my big opinion. Calm down, dear. Whether it's Brexit, Donald Trump's victory in 2016 or Boris Johnson in 2019, political polling of late has been about as accurate as a Gary Barlow tax return. There was huge excitement in Labour ranks about their performance on Thursday, winning the Blackpool South by-election with an impressive swing away from the Tories, taking the West Midlands mayoralty from the popular Conservative incumbent Andy Street and scoring hundreds of council seats. Plus, Londoners must reconcile themselves to 4 more years of divisive identity politics, congestion, spiralling knife crime, antisocial behaviour, and having to pay £12.50 for the privilege of driving their car under the re-elected Sadiq Khan. So Labour think that they're home and hosed. But I don't think it's too late for that support to dry up. And I'm not the only one. A shock new projection from Sky News, using the latest figures from Thursday's local elections, suggests, in spite of the Tories' collective nervous breakdown, Britain is heading for a hung parliament. Based upon results from 2 million council wards and projecting those voting figures into a nationwide estimate, Labour is on course to be the largest party in Parliament, but will fall short of a Commons majority by 32 seats. Meanwhile, polling guru Michael Thrasher has thrashed out the numbers and told Sky News' Sunday morning show that Labour needs to be at double its current 7% national equivalent vote to win a majority in the House of Commons. So they need to double their current support. Which means that Labour's performance on Thursday is far from the triumph that they would have you believe. At the fag end of a Tory government with 4 prime ministers in the last 6 years, a cost of living crisis, sky-high energy bills, spiralling interest rates, and a country still reeling from what I consider to have been a disastrous COVID overreaction, leading to an NHS waiting list of 8 million people, a broken economy and a generation of damaged kids, how is it possible that Labour still don't have enough support to win a landslide? Well, as I have suspected for a long time, there's no great excitement at the idea of Prime Minister Starmer, someone who, in my view, is nothing more than a walking political algorithm, a human manifestation of ChatGPT software gone wrong. Tony Blair, he ain't, and 1997, this is not. Moreover, Reform UK did not have the impact that they might have hoped for last Thursday, and whilst the Greens and Lib Dems performed well in relative terms, plus smaller parties and independents, the door remains ajar for an unlikely Conservative victory in November, with Rishi Sunak potentially doing a John Major and grabbing victory from the jaws of defeat, as Major did in 1992. Rishi Sunak is in a good position as the country turns the corner after a torrid 4 years. Inflation is coming down, and yes, Sunak can take some credit for that, as he faced down the militant unions with their inflation-busting pay demands. Plus, he's kept a lid on public spending, which raises prices. The Rwanda legislation is through. The first voluntary migrant has already arrived in the African nation. The authorities are currently catching up with others who are illegally here, and those flights will take off in the summer. Rishi Sunak can point to the Deputy Prime Minister of Ireland, Micheál Martin, who has effectively said the Rwanda plan is already working, with migrants bypassing the UK and heading straight for the Republic. Meanwhile, today's papers report that the Belfast to Dublin coach route has now been nicknamed the Brexit Express due to the increased number of asylum seekers in Northern Ireland using this bus service to travel down south to seek refuge in Ireland. Look, it hasn't been a glorious reign, but since he came to power less than 2 years ago, Rishi Sunak has steadied the ship, presiding over modest economic growth and largely avoiding recession, unlike the Eurozone. He has ended the Brexit deadlock in Northern Ireland with the Windsor Framework, which has seen the restoration of power sharing in Northern Ireland. He has recalibrated our approach to net zero, making it more sensible, more affordable and more realistic. And he has begun the woke fight back against bonkers trans ideology. And word on the street is that legal net migration, which was approaching 700,000 last year, is also seeing a sharp decline. When the public go to the polls, most likely in November, it is clear that the toxic Conservatives will struggle, and deservedly so, after the shambles of recent years. Partygate, the Liz Truss mini-budget, and Boris Johnson's disastrous acquiescence to the doom-mongers at Sage, whose lockdowns, mask mandates and vaccine tyranny caused so much damage. But when it's a choice between Sunak and Starmer, it is not so cut and dried. Starmer, responsible for more screeching U-turns than Lewis Hamilton, is not trusted. No one knows what he stands for, following his about-turn on his £28 billion green revolution, his previous support for Jeremy Corbyn to be Prime Minister, his efforts to reverse Brexit, and most pathetically, his sudden decision last weekend that biological sex does matter now, having previously thrown the heroic Labour MP Rosie Duffield under the bus with his insistence that she was wrong to say only women have a cervix. Now he says only women do have a cervix. Make it make sense. Sunak has now got 6 months to prove that he is the one that deserves 5 more years in power. It's unlikely, but it's possible. Labour's champagne socialists shouldn't pop their corks too soon. They might find that by November, some of that sparkle has gone flat. I don't like champagne myself. I find it bitter. Anyway, your reaction, gbnews.com/your say. It is the bank holiday weekend, so I hope you got something bubbly in front of you. We've certainly got a bubbly couple of hours, aided and abetted by my top pundits this evening. I'm delighted to have journalist and communications expert Linda Jubilee. We also have former advisor to Boris Johnson, political broadcaster Lord Coulvier Ranger, and campaigner and best-selling author, Big Chris Wilde.
Yeah.
Great to see all three of you. Chris, let's get down to business. The bottom line is that the Conservatives are terrible, but 5 years of Labour would be far worse.
Yeah, do you know what? This last couple of weeks has taught me a few lessons, is that, you know, everybody's putting out their mandates, but nobody's talking about the real problems. Is like, I work in the community, I see people, they're losing their properties, they're becoming homeless. We've got young people who are being forced into criminal organisations just to survive, and no council, rather, you know, from any party has mentioned real problems in the last 2 weeks, because they're not easy policy wins. That bothers me, and I've always been open and honest on this show. I do support Labour. It comes back from being from Yorkshire, being from Halifax. It's my working roots, but we spoke about this before on the same panel, is that I don't trust Keir Starmer as my leader. I would trust Andy Berman, but I don't trust Keir Starmer because I think he's more right-wing than he is left, and he doesn't represent what real Labour is. And most of the party members in Labour are still Corbynites, and I think that will be a big problem for him.
Does it mean that when he achieves power, which will likely happen in November, that he's going to find his job very difficult governing his own party?
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think we might see Angela Rayner just steal the reins from him.
Really? Do you think, I mean, from your perspective, do you see Labour, Starmer's Labour, as the lesser of two evils compared to the Tories?
Well, absolutely. But the thing, do you know what it is? I'm not biased. I'm quite new to politics, so I'm not biased about old or new politics. But coming into this, I don't see the dichotomy is not much different. The mandates are exactly the same, but no one's coming up with solutions. It's just, for me, it's not what I expected the new generation of Labour to be at all.
Well, a majority of GB News viewers in a recent poll said they would now rather have a Labour government than a Conservative government. Keir Starmer performed strongly on Thursday. He's ahead in the polls. But from data that you've been looking at, Linda Jubilee, they are not home and hosed.
Not by any means. And I think what will happen, I believe that the Labour Party will win, but by a very tiny number. And I think that smaller parties will become very significant to shoring him up and becoming a much more important part of the political mix. I've got to say, I really agree with what Chris is saying. You've got to hear stuff that matters to the voter. See, the voter, it's not just voter apathy. Voters are starting to have some contempt for our political class, and that is really affecting things. And the reason that is because they listen to all the tittle-tattle, the scandals that go on, the fake apologies. And like me, they visit close family members in hospital over the last 10 days, and they see what, for example, we have to deal with in the NHS.
Absolutely.
And it is very, very distressing for people when they see politicians who won't nail their feet to the floor in order to describe policies that will make a difference.
Well, Colvia, the Tories have been in power more or less for 14 years, if you include the coalition years. Britain needs a change.
It's really interesting to hear Chris and Linda's views here, because these are from the ground. You're not in politics. No. You're outside, you know, the Westminster bubble. And we should really listen carefully to what both of you have said. But on what you're saying, Mark, firstly, I like the change of your tone. You've been putting a nailed-on Labour win, and now you're sort of saying, you know, Rishi has a chance to get back. So I like. Well,
I think the door is ajar.
Yeah, and I think you're right, because actually, what the public are going to hear from Rishi Sunak, the Prime Minister, but from the Conservative Party, is going to be a delivery of policies. And a future vision for Britain that is conservative, which has got lost in the noise of everything that the country has faced, from the pandemic, yes, Brexit, but the war, and this mishmash middle ground that has developed, and where Keir Starmer obviously sits and wants to sit. But I think you'll hear a Prime Minister, as you say, Linda, who will put his feet to the fire on what he's going to do. Workforce reforms for the NHS, pharmacy first for the NHS, looking at dealing with illegal immigration, getting the houses built, and first and foremost, growing the economy. Yes, the Conservatives have always been known about taking care, because if your economy isn't going anywhere, you can't get these public services and pay for them. And Rishi Sunak will focus on that going forward. And he's made sense of net zero. He's doing the right things.
See, I don't think it'll really matter that we talk about Rishi Sunak as though he doesn't have much charisma. You know, he's a really bad public speaker. Not bad public speaker, but average. I think what most people want now is competence. They really want competence, but more than that, they want to believe in what they're voting for. And at the moment, they don't.
Do you think that Keir Starmer would be more competent as Prime Minister than Rishi Sunak, Chris?
Absolutely, I think so, yeah. I think the general public, people from communities, working class people, trust him more than they do Rishi Sunak. And I think that's a socio-economic thing. I think they can, although he's not from a working class background, they kind of relate to Rishi as being some kind of blue blood aristocrat who is not in, you know, who doesn't have any real life experience.
Are you not worried about Keir Starmer's U-turns? He's done more than Maureen from driving school.
I am concerned about that, but I have to focus on, you know, what I believe. And but like I said,
I want to ask, Chris, go on. You know, you asked about whether he's competent. We get a feeling he's competent because he was a prosecutor, but whether he is consistent, whether you can trust what he says and he's going to stick to it. And I think that's the problem with Keir Starmer. He's going to say whatever it takes
to get the votes, to
Right.
win.
There's too much dissent inside the Labour Party.
And I think the real problem is actually what you said earlier, that you vote for Starmer and you get Rayner, and I think the great British public will be really worried about that.
OK, well, listen, I've got the gallery yelling at me. It is time for a quick break, but I had to let that debate roll on. Next up in the big story, as Suella Braverman says she regrets supporting Rishi Sunak as leader, and with Dame Andrea Jenkins saying that Boris should be brought back. Should the Tories have one more roll of the dice and put a new person in charge? Do we need a new Prime Minister before the election? I'll debate that with a top Tory insider next.
Sunday with Michael Portillo from 11, only on GB News.
Many of the people that you had invited to come and speak were people who've been elected in their own countries. I'm thinking of people like Suella Braverman. I'm thinking of Nigel Farage, who has been a member of the European Parliament, of course, had an enormous impact on British politics. And Viktor Orban, who has been elected and re-elected Many people may not care for the Prime Minister of Hungary, but he's certainly an elected person.
And in addition, we had about 15 to 16 members of the European Parliament who were also elected, and they really live in Brussels. And you would imagine that Brussels, being the head of the capital of the EU, would allow elected members of its own parliament to have an opportunity to voice their views. So I think what was very interesting about this is that the mayors overplayed their hands, so that because they overplayed their hands, all public opinion became entirely on our side. It was so evident, so transparent, that this was really an attempt to use the police instead of arguments to react to our conference, that it was a real direct threat, and it is still a direct threat to the freedom of assembly and to free speech.
So how do you think it leaves it? Is it more likely or less likely that there'll be future bans?
I think this is a trial run. What I'm really worried about is that if the future of democracy and free speech depends on the ruling of one judge, and you have to remember that 3 other judges ruled against us, then democracy is in big trouble. What worries me absolutely is that a strong body of political opinion amongst established politicians believes that it is okay to cancel conferences and to crush the people's opinions and prevent the freedom of assembly. Democracy actually depends on these foundational values.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threat and so on.
Our job is to do what's in the best interest of our country.
You made my argument for me.
My guests and I tackle the issues that really matter with a sharp take on every story.
I'm hearing it up and down the country. That was a beginning, not an end.
Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry. Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
A big response to my big opinion at gbnews.com/your say. This from Mark, who says, working class women supporting Starmer. I know plenty who say absolutely not. Adrian, who is a GB News member, says, Mark, yes, we need to replace Rishi and they still have time to impress the people and stop Starmer. Paula has messaged the show and she says, as a lifelong Conservative, the Tories lost my vote due to the way that they put Rishi in as Prime Minister. And Maggie May says, I just wish someone would stop the votes. That would save a fortune. Keep those messages coming. It's time now for the big story, and let's get more reaction to the fallout from the huge losses suffered by the Conservatives on Thursday's local and mayoral elections. Tonight, in the company of Conservative MP for Shipley, Sir Philip Davies. Sir Phil, great to have you on the show. How do you interpret those results, particularly the Blackpool South by-election and the loss of Andy Street in the West Midlands?
Yeah, look, Mark, the fact of the matter is, let's not beat about the bush. We got a good kicking in the local elections and in the by-election. And the public basically wanted to give us a kicking. They basically wanted us to know that they're not happy. They're frustrated. They're frustrated about what's happening particularly with immigration, legal immigration, illegal immigration, and they wanted us to know that in no uncertain terms. And any politician who fails to heed what the public are saying to them is stupid. And so I think we should all acknowledge that the public gave us a kicking. We understand that they're frustrated, and we've got to redouble our efforts to come out fighting and make sure that we win back people's trust. But we're not going to do that unless we first of all accept that people did give us a kicking.
If this was a football team, Philip, the fans would be calling for a new manager. With nothing to lose, why don't the Tories roll the dice one more time and select a more popular leader?
Well, I thought your big opinion was fantastic, as it always is, Mark, but I thought particularly so today. And I think in many respects you answered your own question there. People, I'm a Bradford City football supporter, Mark, which has not always been a happy a thing. But and often the fans are calling for a new manager. The thing that I can always say is that usually changing the manager doesn't usually lead to an improvement in the results. In fact, far from it. Any football team that keeps changing the manager every 5 minutes will tell you that actually it never works. And I mean, to be perfectly honest, we'd be a laughing stock if we changed our leader once again, and we don't need to. Rishi's actually, as you said in your big opinion, actually quietly, perhaps too quietly. I think he needs to explain a bit better the things that he's doing in terms of how he's reduced immigration and all the rest of it. But he's quietly getting on and making changes and solving some of the problems that he was left with, the mess he inherited back in 2022. And I think we just need to sell a bit better what we're doing and highlight, of course, the danger of a Labour government, because when we get to a general election, it's a binary choice. Do you want a Conservative government or a Labour government? And we've got to come out fighting. We've got to accept the things that people are not happy about and do something about it, largely relating to immigration, and come out fighting against the Labour Party, all united as a team. And, to be fair, I was pleased to see all of my colleagues in Parliament recently say, actually, we shouldn't be changing leader now. It's not the time to change leader. And so let's all focus our efforts on highlighting what a completely ocean-going disaster a Labour government led by Keir Starmer and Angela Rayner would be for the country. That's what we need to focus people's minds on.
Now, Sir Phil, writing in the Telegraph today, Suella Braverman, former Home Secretary, has said that the Tories must change course or be wiped out. Here's what she had to say. Take a listen to this, writing in today's Telegraph. On tax, migration, the small boats and law and order, we need to demonstrate strong leadership, not managerialism, which sounds like a dig against Rishi Sunak. She goes on, make a big and bold offer on tax cuts rather than tweaking, as we saw in the budget. She goes on, we should place a cap on legal migration once and for all, leave the ECHR to stop the boats, tangible improvements to our NHS and tougher sentences for criminals, start holding failing police chiefs to account so that antisocial behaviour, shoplifting and knife crime are actually sorted out, take control of the streets again from extremists, and instead of paying lip service regarding transgender ideology, let's change the law to ban the abuse of children. Now, that sounds like a solid plan. It sounds like true conservatism and would certainly be backed by many people watching and listening to this show. So why won't Rishi Sunak do it?
Well, I think actually, if you look what he's doing, he's actually moving in that direction on all of those agenda points, to be perfectly honest. I mean, which of those things is he?
Do you think he should pledge to leave the ECHR in order to unilaterally stop the boats?
Mark, if anyone bothers, and I would urge Suella, I mean, she was in favour of the Rwanda policy, so it seems bizarre that she hasn't read it. But if anybody reads the front page, the front cover, I mean, you don't have to get very far. It's on the front cover of the Rwanda Act of Parliament that's now gone through Parliament. It actually states on the front cover that the government accept that this Act of Parliament does not comply with the European Convention of Human Rights, but the government wishes to proceed with it anyway. So the government, by passing the Rwanda Act, has already said we're not interested in the European Convention of Human Rights. We're quite happy to breach the European Convention of Human Rights, and we're cracking on with it anyway. So, I would gently say to Suella that instead of trying to sort of, in effect, argue against her own party ahead of an election, if she actually looks at what the government's actually doing rather than just blindly criticising everything it's doing, if she actually looks at what it's doing, it's actually already breaching the European Convention of Human Rights in order to deal with illegal migration. So I'm not entirely sure on that particular point what she's actually arguing for that the government isn't already doing.
Can Rishi Sunak do a John Major and win a narrow victory in November? Sky News are projecting that at the moment, on current numbers, Labour would not form a majority in the House of Commons.
Look, all results are possible, Mark. We got a kick in at these elections, and if we don't all, start pulling together in the same direction and start dealing with some of the things that people are concerned about. And one of the things they are concerned about is that we're not all pulling in the same direction. But then we could lose heavily, and Keir Starmer could have a majority of 200. And do people really want Keir Starmer and Angela Rayner to have a majority of 200? It's entirely possible. Equally, if people actually look beyond our election results, Labour's results weren't great. I mean, they won the West Midlands mayoral election with 20,000 fewer votes than they got when they lost in 2021. They won the Blackpool South by-election with 2,000 votes fewer than they lost that seat when Corbyn was leader in 2019. There's no great enthusiasm for Keir Starmer and the Labour Party. There's a lot of people who are sitting at home when elections come around. They're not voting because really they're hacked off with all of us. And the election, it'll be decided by whether those people want to still stay at home, whether they reluctantly want to vote Conservative, whether they reluctantly want to vote Labour, or in effect vote Labour by voting Reform. That will be their choice. But there's all to play for. There's lots of people who clearly are not happy with any of the parties at the moment, and we've got 6 months or so to win those people back.
Sir Philip Davies, lovely to have you on the show. Have a cracking bank holiday weekend. I hope you get a chance to enjoy and relax during some of it. Sir Philip Davies there, Conservative MP for Shipley. Coming up with tonight's Top Pundits, as it's revealed, students are using AI software to write their essays, and with anti-Semitism rife on campus, with free speech non-existent, is there any point in young people getting themselves into debt to go to university? Is higher education worth such a high price? What's the point of university? We'll debate that next.
Hello, welcome to your GB News weather update brought to you by the Met Office. It's going to be staying rather cloudy this evening, but for Bank Holiday Monday, it's a case of sunny spells and showers, but hopefully a little bit more settled as we go into next week. But we have got low pressure firmly in charge, especially across the southern parts of England. This has brought quite a lot of cloud and rain. That cloud and rain is going to continue to push its way northwards, affecting southern parts of Wales, but generally fizzling out across Northern Ireland and Scotland, holding on to a lot of cloud here. Still some outbreaks of showers, heaviest in the north and east, but a lot of cloud around, so temperatures aren't really dipping tonight, but we could see some mist and fog patches develop where we see the clearest skies. As we go through Bank Holiday Monday, then we've got a few watch points, especially across the southeast England. As we start the day, we've got outbreaks of rain that could turn quite heavy at times. Elsewhere, sunny spells, but also some showers breaking out. Again, some of these, it could be on the heavy side, turning dry across Northern Ireland, but rather cloudy. Temperatures around average, but in the sunshine, feeling warm with highs of 17 or 18. As we go through Tuesday, a drier theme. Many places starting off with some sunny spells, but also quite a lot of low cloud, especially across the northeast coast of England. And then through the day, some showers are going to be bubbling up, but high pressure is going to be dominating into next week. That will keep things a bit more settled, with temperatures also on the rise.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We're GB News, and we come from a proud tradition of British journalism.
That's why I'm so excited to be here. It's something so new.
The first news channel to be launched in Britain in over 30 years.
Launched to represent the views of the British people.
To go where other broadcasters refuse to go.
How did you find out about the story in the first place?
Launched with one aim.
To be the fearless champion of Britain.
It's an absolutely fantastic atmosphere here.
This is GB News.
The People's Channel. GB News, Britain's news channel.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall? Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Welcome back. We've got Lord Tony Sewell joining us in just a moment to discuss structural racism in the UK. But first up, as pro-Palestine protests continue to disrupt university life, with anti-Semitism rife on campus, with freedom of speech at an all-time low, and with a report in the papers this weekend that students are using artificial intelligence to write their essays, is university still worth it? With students getting themselves into debt, often to be brainwashed by woke activists posing as lecturers, is university all it's cracked up to be? Check out these extraordinary scenes at the University of Southern California, where hundreds of students have converted to Islam, with female students now wearing the hijab. Well, things haven't gone that far here in the UK just yet, but with the likes of Professor Kathleen Stock hounded out of her position at the University of Sussex for pointing out the reality of biological sex, is higher education really worth such a high price? Let's get the views of my well-educated pundits tonight, Lord Ranger Chris Wilde and Linda Jubilee. Linda, what do you think about this?
Well, what I would say, and I pay close attention to what President Joe Biden said this week, when there's a balance between dissent and discord. There's a line between the two. And you have to find that line because you have to preserve free speech. But once it gets into the area of sowing racial disharmony, inciting racial hatred, etc., you have to step in and do something about it. And I think those protests really, really worry me. There are many students there. They're well-meaning. They want to go and have a protest. But half the time, they don't know what they're talking about, and that's the problem.
Including Corvier, the queers for Palestine, who don't realise that under Hamas, they wouldn't last 5 minutes.
Look, there's the joy of being a student, and I don't know if everyone went to university, but I went to university. Definitely a period of learning in every sense of the word. I don't just mean academically.
Spare us the gory details.
Oh, I'll share them with you later, Mark, don't you worry. But the point is that you're there to understand, you're there to soak up knowledge, not to spout out your half-baked opinions. Yes, seek out the truth. Yes, debate it. Yes, understand the arguments. But this line that says that they are protesting about universities being complicit in war, actions of war. Well, let me tell you, students, your taxes go to pay for weapons. What are you going to do about that? Are you in favour? Are you going to stop paying your taxes to defend the rights of Britain and the values that we hold? So there's an understanding of what exactly are you arguing for? Which position do you want to take? Freedom of speech is absolutely sacrosanct, and I would respect that. But when you start saying that and pressurising universities to stop associating with certain companies, stop it because their research is feeding into certain parts of what they think is wrong or right.
Banning speakers.
Banning speakers, cancel culture. That is not freedom of speech. That's the complete opposite.
Well, does some of these extreme protests and the anti-Semitism we've seen on campus and the cancel culture demonstrate that there is a sickness, Chris Wilde, at the heart of academia?
Absolutely. I mean, I went to drama school, so obviously we would have campaigned in a different way with a contemporary dance.
Of course you would.
No, absolutely.
You'd have dressed up and all the rest of
Listen, it's really worrying. I mean, you know, I've got an 18-year-old boy who's looking at going to university, and it's just that rhetoric. It's just like really bitter at the moment. But I think this is what we've created. We've allowed this to happen for so long, and it's just, where do you draw the line? A good point there as well about university being about free speech, but it's about soaking up that education, not going there to be kind of, you know, forced into these things. And I've seen people leaving university because they don't want to get involved. Their education's going to, you know, suffer because of this.
And they're not even, briefly, Linda, they're not even writing their own essays, some of them. They've got this software called ChatGPT.
And that really does bug me, because great writing comes from great thinking. It's an important discipline to learn. Just like you can't paint by numbers, you can't write by numbers. It so infuriates me that people underestimate the skill and the talent needed for writing, just that you can go and click on
Do we need to rethink the idea that all young people have got to go to university, get themselves in debt, often just to be brainwashed by woke activists posing as lecturers?
Well, look, New Labour's fallacy of education, and everybody should go to university is being found out over the last 10, 20 years.
An expensive mistake.
Yes, absolutely. It should be a choice. It should be up to certain people. We should give the offer to them, but they shouldn't feel they have to go. And obviously, especially when they're doing courses that at the end of the day aren't worth getting them into future jobs. But the issue about AI, I believe university is about learning how to think. I was very, very fortunate. I was taught by tutors who actually wouldn't say to me every week, come in with an essay or a book or whatever it is, come in and tell us what you've thought about. So even if they use ChatGPT to produce something, the challenge is for university to challenge the students to explain their thinking, to be able to verbalise that,
How
to
do
be able to critically understand, and yes, what underpins what you've got on that piece of paper. So they could still produce something from AI if they choose, but they should be able to stand up against it and be able to explain it and be able to be tested on it.
They should have verbal tests.
OK. Well, listen, the views are coming in thick and fast. gbnews.com/your say. Sam has said these students have had a brain fart. No, Sam's not pulling his punches. Listen, university qualifications, says Sean. I never went. I'm 63. And I can fix or make anything, wood, metal, plumbing, but the university students with certificates would not know how to fix a leak, a wardrobe fitting. Never could they do any practical jobs. And Livy, good evening, Livy. Livy says it's Blair's fault for saying university for all. Now his son is pushing apprenticeships. You couldn't make it up, says Livy. Keep those emails and messages coming. In my take at 10, Prince Andrew needs to get his house in order as the £30 million royal lodge that he inhabits is falling apart. Should King Charles evict his own brother? My verdict in my take at 10. But first, is Britain an institutionally racist country? My Mark Meets guest is Lord Tony Sewell, a prominent man of colour in the House of Lords, whose report on the issue saw him attacked, demonised and stripped of an honorary degree. Cancelled for having the wrong opinions. Lord Tony Sewell joins me next.
Good afternoon, Britain. Weekdays from midday.
Now, a woman who 25 years ago, at the age of just 14, tortured and killed her 71-year-old grandmother was last month released from prison on licence.
But this isn't the first time she's been let out. Sarah Davey has been bailed and re-incarcerated no less than 7 times.
Well, to debate this, we're joined by former Detective Chief Inspector Colin Sutton, famed for catching the notorious killer of Millie Dowler, Levi Belfield, and GB News' own Patrick Christys.
I think we have to qualify that where the killer is a child, and we have to accept that to consign somebody to be in prison for 60, 70 or 80 years is probably something that we ought to think twice about. So I understand why this happens. I understand the outrage. I really understand the outrage. I think that 14-year-olds who kill should be given a chance to rehabilitate? Yes, I do. Do I think that somebody who's had 7 such chances and blown them away deserves an 8th chance? Then probably I think that's a lot more doubtful.
I would have thought that by chance, sort of 3 or 4, they'd have got the picture, but clearly not. Patrick, what do you make of it all?
Well, some people are born evil, aren't they? And why should we have to suffer to have them back out on the streets? There are some crimes that are so serious that you should pay for it either with your life or for the rest of your life. This was a sadistic murder, the details of which absolutely cannot be read out on air at this particular time of day. There are 3 issues here. Is this justice for the families of victims? I just think a release like this is a slap in the face, really, to us all. It's another example of soft justice. And just because she's a child, well, she was old enough to commit the heinous crime she committed.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
GB News brings you accurate reporting of the day's topical agenda.
When the news breaks, wherever and whenever it's happening,
We'll be there.
This is GB News.
the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. This is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Is university still worth the money? Mike has messaged gbnews.com/your say. Half the universities should close, probably more. They are not educational establishments, they're for-profit indoctrination camps where people come out thicker than when they went in. And last but not least, Michael, who is a member, a GB News member, who says, I left my secondary modern school in 1962, started my apprenticeship in the printing industry, worked for some of the best companies in the world, progressed into sales, senior manager at 2 German companies, ended my 52-year career as a divisional director of one of the largest foreign corporations in the world. Michael, congratulations. What a career, all without going to university. It's time now for this. Yes, it's time for Mark Meets, and this evening, the Right Honourable, the Lord Sewell of Sanderstead CBE, Tony Sewell. As well as a high-profile and high-flying career devoted to education and charity, in 2020, Lord Sewell was appointed chair of the Commission on Race and Ethnic Disparities. There was uproar in some quarters following the publishing of this report, with the Runnymede Trust, a race equality think tank, saying it felt let down, whilst other commentators suggested that it underplayed institutional racism in this country. Extraordinarily, an honorary degree, which Lord Sewell received from the University of Nottingham in 2019, was withdrawn following the backlash. Well, I'm delighted and privileged to say that Lord Sewell joins me now. Lord Sewell, lovely to have you on the programme. You were born in Brixton in London and grew up in the outskirts in Penge. Your parents arrived in the UK from Jamaica in the 1950s. My folks came over from Ireland at a similar time. How did your early years growing up in this country shape you as a person?
I think it shaped me very well, actually. I mean, I'm not going to deny that there was harsh realities in terms of race. But, you know, the thing that really did shape me was going to Sunday school, going to a space where I think I learned how to be resilient, how to actually think about the positive things of my own agency. And I think those are the things that really drove me to develop where I am today. By the way, that withdrawal of the PhD by my old alma mater, really, I've got a real PhD, you know, not an honorary one from the same place. So, hey, you know, they can do what they want with their honours. Can I just say one thing, Mark? This whole issue of institutional racism. I've never really believed in conspiracy theories, but I think we were thrown one because nowhere in that report did we deny the existence of institutional racism. Yet somehow BBC, everybody was sneaking out that we did deny it even before we wrote the report. It was bizarre.
Well, that's extraordinary. And let me tell you, Tony, that I spent all afternoon researching this commission report. And it says it in black and white on Wikipedia, which shows that what you read on Wikipedia has got to be taken with a pinch of salt. What did the review say? Let's clarify it, OK? You were the chair of that commission. What did it say?
Yeah, GB News viewers will enjoy this, because what we did, we said that there was a difference between disparities and discrimination. So what we did was we said, look, for the first time, we're going to look at white people. We're going to look at everybody in this, because for the last time I looked, everybody was a race, you know. Yeah. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at this from the lens of saying that, look, other things other than race was going to be a factor in whether you did well or not in work, in your engagement with police, etc. So that meant that we came out with a more complex report, and in the end, the conclusions were where you lived in Britain was going to be the key determinant more than race. Where your family structure whether there were single parents or not, was going to determine your outcomes more than race. Not that race wasn't a factor, but it wasn't the most important. And of course, for those race hustlers, it wasn't, for them, it was just bad news.
Well, yes, I mean, that's what I was thinking, Tony. It strikes me that you were being punished for a message that many vested interests and politicised individuals did not want to hear. They were shooting the messenger.
Yeah, well, I don't know if I was punished. I mean, I'm doing very well, thank you. You know, I'm okay. You know, and I've got my new book out, which I know you're going to be publicising.
Well, can we talk about that now? Tell me about that. The Black Success: The Surprising Truth by Tony Sewell. Tell me about the book and why you wrote it.
Well, look, if you think about it, the book is so ironic. What it does is it goes through my own life and it goes through different aspects of what I've been through, helping Hackney education do well, the world of Mary Seacole. And what we find in all these success elements, it had nothing to do with race. In fact, being black actually had very little to do with the element of how success came about. So in the end, what the book is saying is that it's almost disrupting the whole notion of blackness. And you know, and I think your viewers would be upset if, for example, I wrote a book saying white success. It would be a very strange thing to do. So the notion of black success really is, it's actually almost saying that forget you actually got to this place because of your own effort. You got to this place because of your own agency. It wasn't to do with anything to do with your race, you know. And I think that's the key driver, and that's why I think people are enjoying it.
Have we forgotten the message of Martin Luther King, the idea of a colourblind society?
That's right. The content of your character was what is the thing that drives these elements of what makes people successful. You know, I get very frustrated when, I'm not saying to confect it, but I think it's true, where you do get some people getting up and saying, giving you a story about how I had to overcome all these white people like Mark putting his foot in the way, when in fact nothing like that happened. You know, it didn't happen in my life. And why not stick to? So, and then there's this other idea that I've got to work twice as hard as somebody else in order to be successful. These notions are challenged in the book, and you find another story, another narrative which hasn't been told yet. That's why it's a surprising truth.
Well, listen, I'm so excited about it. I've just ordered a copy on Amazon. Yeah, it's out now. Well, I always pay for my own books because then I can give an honest review. Tony, it is out now. It is Black Success: The Surprising Truth. It says Tony Sewell, but really, it is Lord Tony Sewell. It is, in fact, Baron Sewell of Sanderstead. What a proud title. Look, I've only got a couple of seconds. You must have been so honoured to get that title. Your family very proud. What an achievement.
Everyone's very proud. My mum and dad are not alive, but they would have been proud of that honour. And the people of Penge, Brixton and Sanderstead, where I used to live, are really proud. When I see them around, they can... A poor boy from Brixton's up there in the House of Lords. Couldn't make
Baron
it up.
Sewell, you are a star. Listen, I'll be dealing with Prince Andrew next, and he's no Baron.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, welcome to your GB News weather update brought to you by the Met Office. It's going to be staying rather cloudy this evening, but for Bank Holiday Monday, it's a case of sunny spells and showers, but hopefully a little bit more settled as we go into next week. But we have got low pressure firmly in charge, especially across the southern parts of England. This has brought quite a lot of cloud and rain. That cloud and rain is going to continue to push its way northwards, affecting southern parts of Wales, but generally fizzling out across Northern Ireland and Scotland, holding on to a lot of cloud here. Still some outbreaks of showers, heaviest in the north and east, but a lot of cloud around, so temperatures aren't really dipping tonight, but we could see some mist and fog patches develop where we see the clearest skies. As we go through Bank Holiday Monday, then we've got a few watch points, especially across the southeast England. As we start the day, we've got outbreaks of rain that could turn quite heavy at times. Elsewhere, sunny spells, but also some showers breaking out. Again, some of these could be on the heavy side, turning dry across Northern Ireland, but rather cloudy. Temperatures around average, but in the sunshine, feeling warm with highs of 17 or 18. As we go through Tuesday, a drier theme. Many places starting off with some sunny spells, but also quite a lot of low cloud, especially across the northeast coast of England. And then through the day, some showers are going to be bubbling up, but high pressure is going to be dominating into next week. That will keep things a bit more settled, with temperatures also on the rise.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
It's the biggest cash prize we've given away to date. An incredible £20,000 that you could use however you like. And because it's totally tax-free, every single penny will be in your bank account to do whatever you like with. £20,000 in tax-free cash really could be yours this summer. But you've got to be in it to win it. For another chance to win £20,000 in tax-free cash, text PRIZE to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB05, PO Box 8690, Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 31st of May. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria DiPiero, bringing you
PMQ's live here on GB News.
Whenever Parliament is in session on a Wednesday at midday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions. We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio and online.
This is GB News,
Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and this is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Happy Bank Holiday, one and all. It is 10 o'clock on television, on radio and online in the United Kingdom and across the world. This is Mark Dolan Tonight. In my take at 10, Prince Andrew needs to get his house in order as the £30 million royal lodge that he inhabits is falling apart. Should King Charles evict his own brother? My verdict in 2 minutes. Also, should Reform UK make an election pact with the Conservatives to keep Sir Keir Starmer out of number 10? I'll be asking tonight's newsmaker, former government minister Anne Widdecombe. Plus, tomorrow's newspaper front pages and live reaction in the studio from tonight's top pundits. And before the end of the hour, Jeremy Clarkson has tonight launched a blistering attack on political correctness. Find out why TV's most bankable star and celebrity farmer has had enough of woke, and he's not pulling his punches. So, a packed show, lots to get through. Prince Andrew in 2 minutes' time. I'm not pulling my punches with him either. But first, the news headlines and Sam Francis.
Mark, thank you very much, and good evening to you from the newsroom. It's just after 10 o'clock.
Rishi Sunak is under pressure from some of his own MPs and opposition parties after a set of disappointing local election results this week. The Conservative mayor for the West Midlands, Andy Street, was defeated by Labour's Richard Parker, while Sadiq Khan is beginning his third term as London mayor after securing a majority of 275,000 votes. Well, opposition leaders claim that those election results show we need a general election now, they say. However, the government minister, Mark Harper, insists the Conservatives are focusing on the priorities of the British people.
I think all Conservatives now need to get behind the Prime Minister, as the chairman said in his article this morning, and take that message to the country. We see from the analysis that experts have done that the results show that the position is closer than the polls are suggesting, so everything is to fight for the next election, and we're absolutely up for that fight.
In other news, 4 men have been arrested today after £40 million worth of cocaine was found in East Yorkshire. Around 500 kilos of the drug was discovered in the back of a van in a pub car park. Officers believe the haul had been brought ashore in a boat, transporting it from a larger vessel off the coast of Hull. Senior investigators say it's a major blow to the organised crime group which attempted to smuggle it into the UK. A 10-year-old girl has died and 4 other people have been hospitalised after a house fire in Bradford. Emergency services were called to Kingsdale Drive in the early hours of this morning. A woman and her 3 children did manage to escape the property with non-life-threatening injuries. Sadly, though, the young girl was pronounced dead at the scene. Police have confirmed the fire's not being treated as suspicious. In Northern Ireland, a man has been left with potentially life-changing injuries after he was found nailed to a fence. Police have described the attack in the residential area of Bushmills as sinister and brutal. Officers who attended the incident also said 2 vans had been set on fire in the public car park near to where the man was found. Police are now appealing for anyone with information or those who may have dashcam footage to urgently call 101. Another small boat crossed into UK waters this morning with at least 50 people on board. It brings the total number of migrants crossing so far this year to more than 8,500. That's 35% higher than the same period last year. Ministers have blamed the increase in numbers on, they say, a surge in migrants from Vietnam. And we heard today that the actor Bernard Hill, best known for his roles in Titanic and the Lord of the Rings trilogy, has died at the age of 79. It comes just hours before his release of the latest project he's in, Season 2 of drama The Responder, with Martin Freeman. Fans of the cinema icon have been sharing tributes on social media, while also honouring their favourite performances from his career. For the latest stories, you can sign up to GB News Alerts. Just scan the QR code there on your screen. Or if you're listening on radio, go to our website, gbnews.com/alerts.
My thanks to Sam Francis, who returns in an hour's time. Welcome to a busy Mark Dolan tonight. Should Reform UK make an election pact with the Conservatives to keep Sir Keir Starmer out of number 10? I'll be asking tonight's newsmaker, former Government Minister and Reform UK supporter Anne Widdecombe. Plus, tomorrow's newspaper front pages and live reaction in the studio from tonight's top pundits this evening. Journalist and communications expert Linda Jubilee, former advisor to Boris Johnson, Lord Coolvere Ranger, and campaigner and best-selling author Chris Wilde. Also tonight, before the end of the hour, Jeremy Clarkson has this evening launched a blistering attack on political correctness. Find out why TV's most bankable star and celebrity farmer has had enough of woke and he's not pulling his punches. It is a packed hour. Those papers are coming, and Anne Widdecombe is waiting in the wings. Plus, we have got a bank holiday vibe. So listen, I hope that lots of you have got time off tomorrow because you've worked hard and you deserve a break. And if you are working tomorrow, can I salute you for your contribution to the unstoppable powerhouse that is the British economy. Right, lots to get through. Anne Widdecombe, the papers, the pundits, but first, my take at 10. Not for the first time in his life, Prince Andrew needs to get his house in order. The Mirror newspaper report that Andrew's crumbling mansion threatens to reignite a fresh row with King Charles after the two royal brothers struck a deal in which Andrew stayed in this luxurious abode in return for keeping it in good shape. But like his personal reputation, Prince Andrew's 30-bedroom royal lodge is crumbling. The property, part of the Windsor estate and worth £30 million, if you don't mind, is reportedly beset with problems, including rising damp, cracks in the brickwork and unsightly peeling paintwork. This is hardly befitting the most revered family in the country, if not the world. The Mirror report that Andrew has been struggling to meet the £400,000 a year upkeep of Royal Lodge. And whilst the building falls into rack and ruin, the Queen's former favourite son, who is no favourite with Charles these days, refuses to budge. Andrew, who is 7th in line to the throne, may God help us, is the world's poshest squatter. And this stalemate over his accommodation is a headache for the King and an embarrassment for the country. But old Randy Andy himself, Prince Andrew, seems impervious to embarrassment, as demonstrated by that toe-curling Newsnight interview. Astonishingly, Andrew has been living it up at this home, this lovely royal lodge, for 20 years and signed a 75-year lease on it after agreeing to maintain it and paying a rent of, wait for it, £250 a week. That wouldn't even get you a broom cupboard in London. Now, for his sins, Prince Andrew has to live somewhere. But this vast palace in which he currently resides strikes me as highly inappropriate for a man who has brought such embarrassment and shame on the family, following his profoundly ill-advised friendship with known paedophile Jeffrey Epstein, and the humiliation of writing a cheque for £12 million to draw a line under the Virginia Giuffre scandal, in which he stood accused of relations with a minor. Allegations, I should argue and add, that he denies. What can't be denied is that Prince Andrew is a stubborn stain on the royal family that no amount of aerial automatic will remove. Stripped of his royal duties and his HRH title, his accommodation should reflect his scaled-back role, which is why Charles's rumoured idea of evicting Andrew from this plush Windsor estate and moving him to Frogmore Cottage strikes me as the right move. Of course, if he gets sent to Frogmore, he'll be hopping mad, seeing this smaller pad as a demotion too far. Tough luck, mates. Frogmore Cottage was previously the home of Harry and Meghan, so there should be plenty of space for Prince Andrew, even though he might want to get the venue fumigated and given a deep clean after the toxic Sussex's stint there. There is another alternative, though. Andrew can stay in the Royal Lodge, and rather than use his free time riding horses and driving around the estate in his Range Rover, perhaps he could put a shift in and do a bit of DIY. He's got plenty of time to give Royal Lodge a bit of a makeover himself. We know this guy has barely done a day's work in his life, but it's not too late to start. The man previously known as Randy Andy could become Handy Andy. In the end, the palatial Royal Lodge can be renovated, but Prince Andrew himself is beyond repair. Should King Charles evict Prince Andrew from the £30 million Royal Lodge? Let me know your thoughts. gbnews.com/your say. Your views in just a moment, but first, tonight's top pundits. For Ringside Action, we have journalist and communications expert Linda Jubilee, former advisor to Boris Johnson, Lord Coulvier-Ranger, and campaigner and best-selling author Chris Wilde. Well, Coulvier-Ranger, what do you think about this? Do you think that the King has a decision to make here? Should he turf his brother out of the Royal Lodge?
Well, it all is beginning to sound a bit too Shakespearean, really, here, Mark. And what I would say is blood is thicker than water, and I think the King probably has a duty to look after his younger brother. He feels that duty. We know he's passionate about his family. I'm sure he cares for him. despite the challenges, the issues, the ills, the wrongs, the things that we have all heard about that have dogged Prince Andrew. And I don't think he's already been sent to Coventry. I don't think he wants to send him to Frogmore. I think he probably will find a way of looking after Prince Andrew that is suitable for him and ensuring that maybe he gives him a platform. I know that there seems to be no way back, but he has plenty of fuel in the tank. I'm sure there's things that Prince Andrew could do to help people quietly in his private life. He's still a man who has probably, energy and time. So let's hope that the King helps him to use that in the right way.
Chris Wilde, how do you solve a problem like Prince Andrew?
I was going to be respectful, but I'm not. I find him repugnant, and I have a solution. I'd like to see him do an episode of House Swap, where he goes to live in Edmonton in a one-bedroom flat, which is covered in damp with water coming through, and then he'd stop moaning so much. Listen, on a positive note, he can make amends. He can go out there and do some quality work. And he should do that, Let's not, kind of sugarcoat this. He is a repugnant person. He is very privileged, and I would love to see him on Celebrity House Swap. So if anyone's out there, if anybody wants to do that, I want to see that.
I would like Linda Jubilee to see Prince Andrew redeem himself, as Chris Wilde has suggested. I don't think you should ever give up on someone. As I said last night in my Take at 10 about Prince Harry, blood is thicker than water. Andrew remains the late Queen's favourite son. He remains the King's brother. But I don't think that this 30-bedroom accommodation is appropriate for a man with his now current low status in the public esteem.
No, he should be going straight to Frogmore Cottage. I think that's actually quite a luxurious abode for him. At the end of the day, what you've got to remember is that... And I have 3 children, 2 Gen Zs, 1 millennial. And their top concern, as we move forward through the year towards the election, the top 2 concerns, the climate and the housing crisis. Now, I've got 3 children, all of whom have master's degrees, all of whom are highly qualified, 2 of whom do not anticipate getting close to owning their own property until they're in their late 30s, because they're living in London and they have to afford London prices. So you can't live on planet Unreal and live in this way and expect to be treated with respect by the rest of the country. You just can't. You've got to get real. Why doesn't he start helping with a housing project? That would be a good idea.
Not a bad idea. Give him a roller and some paint and some overalls rather than those Savile Row suits. What do you think? gbnews.com/your say. Should King Charles evict his brother Andrew and send him into smaller accommodation? Look, lots more to get through, let me tell you. And I'm excited to say that lovely Anne Widdecombe is waiting in the wings. A senior Conservative MP has called for an electoral pact with Reform UK, saying MPs could stand for both the Conservatives and Reform in order to win the next election. So what do you think? Should Reform and the Tories do a deal to keep Keir Starmer out of number 10? Former Government Minister Anne Widdecombe, who is a Reform UK supporter, is next.
Patrick Christie's Tonight. Weekdays from 9 p.m.
And I did want to give you a platform, but I also want to give you an opportunity to apologise to anyone that you might hurt, and also give a message now to people who might want to copy some of the things that you've done, because people have copied it. So is there anything you'd like to say about that?
So the first thing you addressed, I do want to say sorry, because I did say sorry in the BBC interview, and that's the only thing they put out as a clip. So I don't know why they tried to do that, but I'll say it again on GB News here. I apologise to all the victims in the past that I've may have caused distress to, may have harassed, may have mentally tormented in any type of way. I apologise to them because I didn't mean to do that, and I was just having fun at the moment, but I didn't realise that it would have negative repercussions and negative effects on their psychological, way of thinking. So I apologise for that. And also, the one thing I have to say to young people is social media isn't real. Like, what I've portrayed to the guys on the internet is that I'm this cool, I don't give a toss about anything. But me as a person, I really do care. And for people I don't really read comments on the internet, because if I was to do that, I would probably go into a depressive state. All I can say to you guys is believe in yourself, and there's bigger things you can do out there than just being an absolute menace on the internet or being antisocial. Like, if you have ambitions, like I like to read, I like music. I want to go deeper into my passion so I understand me as a person and not what other people think I am.
You are an articulate young man. You are obviously intelligent as well when you talk like this. And I really hope, for your sake and for the sake of a lot of people who did take a negative influence from what you did initially, that you really don't go back down that route.
I have a child as well, and I have to be there, not just for me, but for my child, for my child's mother, for my mother. I have to be there for a lot of people. It's not just me. So I need to put in the work.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Should King Charles evict Prince Andrew from the Royal Lodge, which the Mirror newspaper are reporting has fallen into rack and ruin? Well, that was the topic of my take at 10. And Wendy says, good evening, Mark. I'm afraid as our late Queen's favourite Andrew became spoiled, over-entitled and overindulged, he turned into a rather unpleasant individual. Send him on a DIY course, then send him to do up properties for our homeless veterans. Well, Wendy, if he did that, I think he would become a very popular, celebrated figure. Any other options here? Stuart says, Mark, maybe Prince Andrew could try out one of the nice rooms in Rwanda. There you go. Put Prince Andrew on a plane, see how that one plays out. I'll get to more of your feedback very shortly. But a senior Conservative MP has called for an electoral pact with Reform UK, saying that MPs could stand for both Conservatives and Reform in order to win the next election and keep Sir Keir Starmer out of number 10. Here's what Dame Andrea Jenkins, MP, had to say when speaking to Darren Grimes on the Saturday 5 on GB News last night.
That it's highly unlikely that they're going to elect MPs, especially given our first past the post electoral system, but it's certainly going to hand things to Labour. So, I mean, I think even we could be radical. Let's have let's have MPs standing as Conservative and Reform candidates.
Oh, wow. What a thought. Well, should Reform go to bed with the Conservatives? Let's get the views of former Conservative government minister and now Reform UK supporter, tonight's newsmaker Anne Widdecombe. Anne, Nigel Farage's deal with Boris Johnson in 2019 kept Jeremy Corbyn out of number 10 and helped secure Brexit. A similar deal this November would keep Sir Keir Starmer out of office. What's not to like?
Everything about it is not to like. First of all, that deal that you mentioned in 2019, when the Brexit Party, as we then were, stood down in every single Conservative-held seat, every single one. They would give us nothing in return. They wouldn't give us their 10 worst seats that they'd never, ever held. They wouldn't give us anything in return. But they did promise us a lot with regard to Brexit. And then what happened? They get elected with a massive majority and they get all arrogant and dismissive about it, give us no credit at all for what happened, and worse than that, far worse than that, betray Brexit by putting a border down the Irish Sea, for heaven's sake, breaking up the UK. So, we're not going to fall for that again. I mean, our line will be, we trusted you last time and look what happened. It's not going to happen again. Sorry, Andrea, it's not going to happen.
And were you disappointed by Reform UK's performance at the local elections on Thursday? Was it a damp, turquoise-coloured squid?
Good heavens, no. I mean, first of all, we were only contesting 260 seats because our focus has been and will continue to be until after the election on Westminster and on government, not on the local elections yet. That is something that will come. But when you look at how we performed in the Blackpool South by-election, I mean, it was a wonderful night. We came within 117 votes of pushing the Tories into third place. We're 17% almost. We're just behind them. Now, I do believe what Richard Price says, which is that we can, over the next few months, overtake them. And at that point, we become the opposition. No, I didn't think it was a damp squib. And before you say, that they were bad results, I mean, the fact is that in the Midlands and in the North, we've now become the natural opposition to Labour. Look at the results, analyse them for yourselves. We were getting over 30% in some wards.
But what's the point in leapfrogging the Conservatives into second place if Labour win?
The point is that we will then have some proper common sense policies. The point is we will then have a party which really will dismiss woke instead of just talking about it, really will stop the vote, really will have a blitz on knife crime, really will reduce taxes, really will do all the things that the Conservatives have been promising for so long. And at that stage, when we overtake them and become the opposition, I mean, then if people like Dame Andrea want to join us, well, I'm sure we would entertain their application.
But Anne, when is that going to happen? Nigel Farage told me on this programme that Labour could be in power for a decade. So destroying the Tories sounds like a pretty hollow victory to me if it's Keir Starmer in number 10 for 10 years.
You're talking as if there were any possibility of Keir Starmer not winning the next election and beating the Conservatives. If you believe that, then all I can say is, I don't know where you've been for the last year or two. Honestly, he's going to win anyway. When people say to me, oh, but you'll let Keir Starmer in, I say, oh, but he's going to be in anyway. However, there is not the slightest need for him to be in for a decade, but that means having the right policies that actually resonate with people of all economic groups, not just with the metropolitan elite.
And let's have a listen now to these Green Party candidates celebrating victory in Thursday's local elections.
We will not be silent. We will raise the voice of Gaza. We will raise the voice of Palestine. Allahu Akbar.
Now, Anne, worth reminding yourself, that is a victorious Green Party candidate. I thought they'd be talking about compost and recycling. Is extremist sectarian politics here to stay?
Well, it's certainly here at the moment. I do sincerely hope it is not to stay, but that demands firm government, and at the moment that is not on offer from either of the major parties, and that is a serious point, not just a political statement. But it will need firm government to get on top of it. But yes, you're quite right in the question. Is sectarian politics here to stay? No, I hope not. But is it here, and is it going to be around for a while? Yes, it jolly well is.
Are you concerned about Sir Keir Starmer's position? You've just suggested in your previous answer you think it's highly likely he will be our next Prime Minister. His support for Israel's right to self-defence is already costing him at the ballot box. Is it possible that a future Labour government, a future Labour Prime Minister will yield to these extremist voices?
Oh, I think it's entirely possible, depending on what the parliamentary arithmetic is. I mean, if he's got a small majority and a lot of Corbynistas and a lot of pro-Palestinian supporters, then he may be very, very pressed. If he's got a larger majority, that's less likely. But it really depends on the composition of the Labour Parliamentary Party. That's what it really depends on, and we don't know what that's going to be.
Anne, before I let you go, are you certain that Labour are going to win the next election? Because a week is a long time in politics. Rishi Sunak has 6 months. Those flights to Rwanda might happen. Inflation is coming down. The economy is growing. And of course, there is that Sky News projection suggesting that based on Thursday's results, Labour may not win an overall majority in the Commons.
Pie in the sky, I think. Unless you're prepared to say that every single opinion poll is vastly wrong, I mean, not just wrong, but vastly wrong, then I think we're going to see a Starmer government. And therefore, it is very, very important that there is a strong alternative, and we are that alternative. And you say that it's a week is a long time in politics, Rishi's got 6 months. Dear heaven, what's he been doing for the last couple of years? And we're supposed to get all excited because he's got another few months. I mean, it's a joke. The Conservatives have failed. It isn't Keir Starmer who's transformed the Labour Party's fortunes. It isn't Keir Starmer. It's the Conservative Party.
Anne, always a privilege to have you on the show. Have a fabulous bank holiday weekend. I hope you have a great day tomorrow. And we'll see Anne in a week's time. Tonight's newsmaker is Anne Widdecombe, former government minister and author and broadcaster. Well, it's time for the papers, and they are next with full pundit reactions. See you in 2.
Hello, welcome to your GB News weather update brought to you by the Met Office. It's going to be staying rather cloudy this evening, but for Bank Holiday Monday, it's a case of sunny spells and showers, but hopefully a little bit more settled as we go into next week. But we have got low pressure firmly in charge, especially across the southern parts of England. This has brought quite a lot of cloud and rain. That cloud and rain is going to continue to push its way south and push its way northwards, affecting southern parts of Wales, but generally fizzling out across Northern Ireland and Scotland, holding on to a lot of cloud here. Still some outbreaks of showers, heaviest in the north and east, but a lot of cloud around, so temperatures aren't really dipping tonight, but we could see some mist and fog patches develop where we see the clearest skies. As we go through Bank Holiday Monday, then we've got a few watch points, especially across the southeast England. As we start the day, we've got outbreaks of rain that could turn quite heavy at times. Elsewhere, sunny spells, but also some showers breaking out. Again, some of these could be on the heavy side, turning dry across Northern Ireland, but rather cloudy. Temperatures around average, but in the sunshine, feeling warm with highs of 17 or 18. As we go through Tuesday, a drier theme. Many places starting off with some sunny spells, but also quite a lot of low cloud, especially across the northeast coast of England. And then through the day, some showers are going to be bubbling up, but high pressure is going to be dominating into next week. That will keep things a bit more settled, with temperatures also on the rise.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio and online.
This is GB News,
Britain's news channel.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threat and so on.
Our job is to do what's in the best interest of our country.
You made my argument for me.
My guests and I tackle the issues that really matter, with a sharp take on every story.
I'm hearing it up and down the country.
That was a beginning, not an end.
Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQ's live here on GB News.
Whenever Parliament is in session on a Wednesday at midday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions. We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
Should Reform UK and the Conservatives do a pre-election deal in order to keep Keir Starmer out of number 10? Well, Helen Bell has messaged gbnews.com/your say. Helen's a GB News member and says Nigel Farage would never do a deal with the Conservatives again. Look what happened last time with Brexit. That was a point Helen made also by Anne Widdecombe. Alan has messaged the show. Reform and the Conservatives should work together to keep Labour out. We do not want a Labour government. We will lose the country. Two parties working together for the better of the country would be fantastic. And anyone with common sense knows that that would work. I do love getting your messages, by the way. We're trying to make Mark Dolan tonight the most viewer and listener reactive show on the channel. So let me do a couple more messages before we get to tomorrow's front pages. How about this? Mel Potter regarding extremism in politics. Mel says it's only a matter of time before we take in thousands of Palestinian refugees from Gaza, regardless of who is in power. OK, folks, well, look, let's have a look at a few more of your messages as we look at tomorrow's papers. So tomorrow's papers first. Here we go. And we start with the Times newspaper. UK heading for a hung parliament, says Rishi Sunak. The Prime Minister has warned that Sir Keir Starmer would be propped up in number 10. Phonophobia. 1 in 4 young adults never answer a call. Financial Times. Tories warn Sunak he needs vision to repair party after poll drubbing. Also, Heineken bets on British pub revival with a plan to reopen closed hostelries. Heineken is reopening 62 British pubs that it had closed in recent years and will put about £40 million annually into refurbishing its estates in the latest sign that pub groups are regaining confidence as cost of living pressures ease. Well, I'll drink to that. Daily Express now. Bernard Hill, Lord of the Rings and Titanic star, dies aged 79. Brilliant actor. Families wrongly paying tens of thousands in care home fees. And only big tax cuts and growth can save the Tories now. This is from Sam Lister, their political editor at The Express. Tory grandees are urging Rishi Sunak to prepare a big tax-cutting offer in a bid to turn around the party's fortunes. Senior MPs argue that Tory voters did not turn up at local elections because they are deeply angry with the government's inability to deliver. Former leader Sir Ian Duncan-Smith says the election is still up for grabs, and if the PM and the party fight for it, they can win. Despite the bad results, it is not over yet, says IDS. Daily Mail now. Fears grow. Middle East conflict will dominate many councils as Muslim Vote group issues Starmer with a list of 18 demands. Dozens of pro-Gaza activists elected. More than 40 councillors were elected in England after making the conflict part of their campaign, according to analysis of the Thursday vote. Some wore rosettes in the colours of the Palestinian flag, whilst others dedicated their victories to the people of Gaza. Daily Telegraph. Sunak shelves a summer election. PM pins hopes for a second term on the economy and Rwanda flights after local election defeats. So I think a July election is not going to happen. You can go off on your summer holidays, folks. Rishi Sunak, the Prime Minister, is said by allies to hope that an improving economic picture and the Rwanda deportation flights expected this summer will improve his re-election chances in the autumn. Compulsory single-sex lavatories for all restaurants and offices. This is an interesting story. Single-sex lavatories will become a legal requirement for all new restaurants, bars, offices and shopping centres, the government have announced. Building regulations will be changed later this year to make it compulsory to provide separate facilities for men and women after an increase in the use of gender-neutral lavatories. Israel threatens imminent Rafah invasion is the other story in the Telegraph. The Eye newspaper. Interest rate cuts unlikely before August, experts warn. Daily Mirror. Tribute to amazing Daniel. Our hearts are heavy, the pain is deep, our faith is strong. Love poured out for Daniel and Jorin. as his community church and football club paid heartfelt tributes. At the church where the 14-year-old was baptised, the pastor there said Daniel's death in a sword attack was unimaginable, adding, "We are family." Well, I know I speak for our viewers and listeners to say our heart goes out to the family of that beautiful little boy taken from them at the age of 14. There were no words. The Guardian, last but not least for now, Into the Groove. Free Madonna concert in Brazil draws 1.6 million fans. An incredible talent, the actor Bernard Hill, who sadly passed away. And Labour sets sights on blue wall seats at the next election. Labour is planning to target the south of England heavily at the general election, as the local election results show some blue wall seats are turning reds. And Israel shuts down local offices of Al Jazeera. Those are your front pages. Let's get reaction from journalist and communications expert Linda Jubilee, former advisor to Boris Johnson, political commentator Lord Culvier Ranger, and campaigner and best-selling author Chris Wilde. Lots of stories to get through. And this one, it's definitely caught my eye, Chris Wilde. Yeah. Phonophobia. 1 in 4 young adults never answer the phone. Are you one of those people?
I can't. Yeah, I am actually. Yeah, my phone always dies, so that's the reason I never answer my phone.
Good excuse.
Mrs. Wilde goes crazy. But you know, it's my wife never has her phone on loud because she works within. She's a consultant within fashion, so she said she can't have it on loud, so she never answers. Yeah. But I think now people don't. It's just WhatsApp, isn't it? That's how people do it now.
But they are fearful. I can tell you now that I often work with very young people, interns at one of the charities I support, and they are actually scared, lacking in confidence to have a proper
conversation because it's just all
they just can't.
The skill set.
That whole skill set.
Holding a conversation with someone like you, Mark.
Yeah,
you know,
they can't do that.
They'd be horribly out of their depth.
But I think Chris's point is interesting as well. That you know, they don't answer because I don't think they make calls.
WhatsApp,
right. It's point-to-point messaging. It's WhatsApp. It's all these other things.
It's all text.
It's all text. So that ability to converse.
Or voicemails.
Yes. Voice notes.
Voice notes. They like voice notes.
But can I just say something quickly, Max? Sorry, I think you lose confidence not talking. I think I've lost confidence a bit. I can send an email or I can send a WhatsApp and say things I wouldn't normally say face to face. So I think we've lost a lot of confidence.
Well, that's the problem.
I think that's also reflected in a work environment where you have to have that conversation with people, and a generation of people who aren't having that time in a work environment, where having those water cooler moments or talking to colleagues as we all do. You know, that's really important for socialising, for building those social skills of having a
around
conversation.
Our dinner table, there's no phones. Whenever I do manage to have dinner with my children.
When you could get them under one roof,
when I can. And we talk. We
Good.
talk all the time.
It's good to talk.
It's so important. It is good to talk.
Well, indeed, and a chat on the phone is very valuable. But we got out of the habit during the pandemic, and we went into our little bubbles and we stopped communicating with people, and many haven't come out of their shell again.
That's true. It did an enormous amount of damage, socially speaking, the lockdown, I think, with our kids.
Well, there you go. How about this in the Times, Culvier? UK heading for a hung parliament, says Rishi Sunak. This has always been the Tories' secret weapon, the threat that Labour would need the support of, for example, the SNP to govern. Of course, that was a threat successfully leveraged in 2010 by David Cameron. It's an old trick, isn't it?
Well, it's not an old trick. I think it's about saying what are the options that could occur, and this is one of those options. And also, it looks like it's a possibility. It's absolutely a possibility. And we're also thinking, what about the Liberal Democrats? You know, quietly beavering away there in the background in the local elections. They've had a reasonable local election result. They've got quite a few additional seats that they've actually polled higher than they've been generally polling. I think they've got about 15%, where they've been generally around the 10% mark. So this is important. But I think the key here is those Conservative voters that stayed at home in these local elections, but not just the local shy Tories, but not just the local elections. That Blackpool South by-election that everyone's been pointing at, people don't mention the turnout as much. In the last general election, it was nearing 60% the turnout in that seat. Wow. At this election, yes, there was a huge swing to Labour. It was, I think, about 32.5%, 33%. So where were all those other voters? And I think that's telling, and that's why the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, has a chance to set out his agenda and get those people who are still undecided, or those Tories who are not convinced, to get them out.
And what about this speculation in one of the other papers, which is that the summer election will not happen? This is the Daily Telegraph. Sunak, Corvair Ranger, shelves plans for a summer election. Smart money is on October or November?
Yes, around that time, before it gets too cold.
Is there an argument for October versus November? Is it party conference
season? It is party conference season.
And American elections.
The American elections.
They need party conference in order to raise money, don't they?
Yes, that's right. That is right.
Parties do, but if it's just before an election, and timing will be important, how it's 4 weeks, 5 weeks election period, and Perda, those conferences could become set pieces for the parties to set their policies out. Now, would Rishi Sunak want to give the other parties an opportunity to do that, or would he want to go? I think he's going to keep his powder dry on the exact date, because that's in his gift to work out what tactically works best for the Conservatives. But I would say the smart money is on it being around October, November time.
Yeah. Any chance of a January election? Could he go whole hog?
Not really. And I'd say the real reason...
It's the weather.
It's the weather. It's also activists being out around the New Year, Christmas time.
Everyone's broke in January.
And also,
so tired, the darkness, it's winter.
And that's just Chris Wilde.
Well, look, people, all of those reasons and more, Mark, are not a reason to call it in January. And historically, it's not been the time that people do it. For all
of course, there's another factor. You're a bit of a historian as well as a journalist, Linda. Events, dear boy, events. Anything could happen in the next 6 months. There could be a war. There could be some sort of global event which could make Rishi Sunak a sort of man of the moment.
Yeah, I mean, I've got to say, I think that's unlikely. It's almost more likely to go.
Things happen, don't they?
I'll tell you what it is. It's the economy. It is down to the economy. I think one of the papers, it's the Independent, is flagging that the Bank of England is not going to look to reduce interest rates till August. Now, that's a problem for the Prime Minister, because those interest rates need to come down to help get the economy going.
Would that be a vote winner?
Yeah, but
it's the knock-on effect.
It changes the narrative, doesn't it?
If that happens in the summer, there is still a time lag before the effects
absolutely.
are felt.
And I was speaking...
Even if you did it in August, you still wouldn't see it in November.
It needs to happen sooner rather than later.
No, but what it does, I wonder, Linda, is it changes the script. That if interest rates come down, that is the headline for the Prime Minister.
It's not enough. People have got to feel it.
By the way, the campaign he runs, do you think he should do a John Major and bring the soapbox out of retirement? Because that worked very well in 1992.
It won't work for him.
No, well, he's too posh for a soapbox, isn't he?
He'll need to stand on it so he looks a bit taller, that's about it.
He can always do with a soapbox.
We're in a different world, Mark, because I know this Prime Minister is so tech-savvy. We're seeing all these videos and, Instagrams and TikToks and things, which some of us might think, well, it looks a bit sort of, for the youth, but actually it's cutting through. It is cutting through. We'll see a very technology-driven digital campaigning going here and in America. The volume of information that's going to be out there. But I don't stop from the fact that he will be on the streets. He must be out there, meeting people, talking to people, being on the high streets, listening to people. That's what also voters
It's not his strength.
No, it's not his strength, is it? So he'll be tested in a few months' time. Will he travel by train? Because this is a great story in the Mail.
Oh, I love this.
Train squatting is the headline. It's a cracking headline. Meet the 17-year-old who lives on trains. That's right, lives on trains, using a yearly season ticket to hop from one service to another. He's called Lasse Stolli. He lives in Germany. And he showers in leisure centres, sleeps on night trains and carries just a backpack. Cheaper than renting. What a clever guy.
What a legend. Legend. What a legend. And I think just say, what a great story. Just in all this melancholy and depression. That's a great story.
It's like the film, The Terminal.
Steven Spielberg film.
Tom Hanks.
Exactly like that. It's Tom Hanks.
But this is like, normally students take a gap year, don't they? Or they used to. Now he's taking a train year. I think it's a wonderful way for him to sort of see the country, learn about different people. The best thing you could do, I was always told, is travel by train and talk to people on the train. I did it across America once. I travelled from one end of the States to the other on Amtrak. It took 3.5 days. And boy, do you meet some interesting people.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
So it's a wonderful experience at this age for him to do.
You know, it takes 3.5 days to get from Halifax to Huddersfield with the problems.
Now, this is a good point. This is a German story, but actually it reflects an issue in the West, which is that for many it's cheaper to live on a train than live in a flat.
Yeah, I know. That's the obvious takeaway.
That is the takeaway. But it's £8,500 he's spending on this. And let's be honest, he's carrying his clothes in a bag and he's washing them in the basins in the train. So it's not a luxurious lifestyle he's leading by all means. And I think he can do it as a 17-year-old. I think further on in life,
it'll be a little bit uncomfortable.
What a great thing to do at 17. What a great thing to do.
I think so. As long as he likes egg and cress sandwiches, that's got to be the hope. Coming up, more newspaper front pages and live reaction from my top pundits. Plus, next up, Jeremy Clarkson has tonight launched a blistering attack on political correctness. Find out why TV's most bankable star and celebrity farmer has had enough of woke. He's not pulling his punches. We'll discuss Clarkson next.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
In the quaint Derbyshire village of Sudbury, there's a storm brewing between the local football club and the National Trust. This grass field might seem unremarkable, but for hundreds of years it's been part of the Sudbury Hall estate, playing host to the village football and cricket matches. Now the National Trust are planning to put an end to that tradition in the name of biodiversity, with plans for trees and plants where the football club play. Some worry it breaks a memorandum of wishes from the late Lord Vernon, whose family have lived here since 1660. Manager of Sudbury FC Tom Crutchley says he's upset at the decision.
Naturally disappointed. We've been here, this is our 9th year. We've put a lot of effort into here to keep playing, to maintain it. I'm from the village originally, so personally it was it is very upsetting.
MP for Derbyshire Dale Sarah Dines says the National Trust aren't respecting the history of the site.
I feel they're trampling over the wishes of historic owners who gave up this wonderful site for the nation. And for over 100 years people have played football and cricket here. It's incredibly sad. Incredibly sad, and it's against the wishes of a lot of people locally who've written to me from the village.
Sudbury Hall lives under the branding of the Children's Country House, a decision which Dines says is disrespectful to the history of the estate.
I mean, this is fake to make it into a children's theme park. It's almost a reimagining, and in fact that's the very words it says on their website. The house is reopened, it's been reimagined. I don't want our heritage to be reimagined. I think the National Trust has been captured by people who have different ideas than most people in this country.
Whilst the public will still be able to roam these historic grounds, the village feels like a legacy is being snatched away. Jack Carson, GB News, Sudbury.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry. Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
We're GB News, and we come from a proud tradition of British journalism.
That's why I'm so excited to be here. It's something so new.
The first news channel to be launched in Britain in over 30 years.
Launched to represent the views of the British people. To go where other broadcasters refuse to go.
How did you find out about the story in the first place?
Launched with one aim.
To be the fearless champion of Britain.
It's an absolutely fantastic atmosphere here.
This is GB News.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
On the message board, John says, Mark, local elections and mayoral elections are voted on by people who rightly care about local issues. The general election, says John, will be a very different affair. How about this? How long does a Prime Minister have to be in office in order to get the full pension? Is he hanging on for that, asks Sean. Well, Stephen has replied 5 minutes or until the lettuce is dead. And Reeb says he doesn't need the money, but obviously he is entitled to it. Look, I'll get to more of your messages if there is time. Reacting to the big stories of the day. Linda Jubilee, Boris Johnson's former advisor, Kulveer Ranger, and campaigner and author Chris Wilde. And we've got one more front page, and this is the Daily Star. Dust off your budgie smugglers, folks. Corfu! It'll be hotter than Corfu this week, but after one last soaking. That's right, Britain will finally bask in 24 degrees centigrade heat this week after months of rain. It'll be warmer than Corfu, but we've got one last downpour to deal with. And what will that downpour be? Maybe it'll be a cold beer on Bank Holiday Monday. Listen, Jeremy Clarkson has hit out at content warnings on TV and in films. The ex-Top Gear host says it's worlds away from the Britain that he grew up in. He told the Times newspaper the constant warnings for nudity and violence often leave him disappointed with what he eventually sees. It's been a comprehensive rant about woke political correctness. Clarkson's had enough. Do you think that that's understandable, Kulveer? Can you blame him?
I can't blame him, but, you know, I understand. Look, he's been portraying the curmudgeonly old man for a very long time now, but this is a point, and in fact, I notice it because I watch a lot of Disney programmes with my young children. Yeah. And generally before the older Disney content, there'll be a card up which will talk about cultural issues and misappropriation and values that we don't agree with. And I read it intently, and then I look at my 5-year-old and 3-year-old. They're not reading it. They're not saying it. They're waiting for the music to start, the dwarfs to come in, you know, Snow White to make her magic and the Prince Charming and everything else. These traditional, legendary old stories will always be these traditional, legendary old stories. We can make new stories in current times to reflect maybe some of the values that we now see as appropriate. But rehashing or trying to edit history or trying to put all these warnings in front,
wrong.
I think it was of a time, and we will learn about it.
But do you think you need people like Jeremy Clarkson, who've got that kind of figure, that profile, to call it out as well? Because
absolutely.
There is a line, isn't there, where, you know, when is enough, and how protected do we have to protect people?
Yeah, but it's about the arts. The arts are supposed to shock. That's what's supposed to happen. It's supposed to instigate debate. There's supposed to be things that take your breath away. You know, it's supposed to surprise you. That's what is supposed to happen.
Shakespeare, all the great Dickens. There's stuff in there that we'd all take issue with if we want to microcosm them and say, well, we can't see this and this is inappropriate and so on and so forth. So yes, you know, universities putting warnings on books, things before programmes. God, where do we stop? We're trying to have this kind of blanket vanilla approach to everything. That's not very fun,
Well,
is it?
no. I mean, Clarkson, writing in the Times, has said, today we have warnings before every show about all of the horrors that lie ahead. We're told that we're going to see nudity and smoking, and there may be drug misuse. He said, today we're told on an hourly basis that our children are subjected to far too much online titillation. But he doubts that the type of content children are exposed to now, Chris Wilde, is worse than what he grew up with back in the day.
Yeah, well, I think, you know, as a father to a 10-year-old girl who's got access to a computer and a phone, is like, some of the material on there, you can't protect them, you know, they can get access.
And that is quite very serious.
And that's scary. That's really scary.
That's serious.
And then you've got AI now who can kind of facade these stories as well, make these videos so they look real. It's more dangerous now than it's ever been.
Do we go back onto those good old days when we would just get warned about flashing lights?
PG signs.
That was the thing that would really worry. There will be strobe lighting, please. You know, that could be serious for some people, but that was the trigger.
That's exactly right. So, listen, dust off your budgie smugglers, Chris Wilde.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which I would imagine you are absolutely packed into.
Absolutely. Do I look like the kind of guy to absolutely am?
Definitely. And you're going to show us your abs. Are you looking forward to the heat wave? It's coming this week.
I am. I'm looking forward to it. Yeah. As a northerner, everything's hot for me. So
you've never seen the sun before, have you?
No.
Listen, can I thank you, Chris Wilde, Kulveer Ranger, Linda Jubilee. Always a thrill to have you. Good friends of mine, as are you, at home on the radio and wherever you're consuming Mark Dolan tonight. It's the greatest privilege to broadcast to you. I shall return on Friday at 8. Have a great bank holiday tomorrow, whatever you're doing. Headliners is next.
Brilliant.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, welcome to your GB News weather update brought to you by the Met Office. It's going to be staying rather cloudy this evening, but for Bank Holiday Monday, it's a case of sunny spells and showers, but hopefully a little bit more settled as we go into next week. But we have got low pressure firmly in charge, especially across the southern parts of England. This has brought quite a lot of cloud and rain. That cloud and rain is going to continue to push its way northwards, affecting southern parts of Wales, but generally fizzling out across Northern Ireland and Scotland, holding on to a lot of cloud here. Still some outbreaks of showers, heaviest in the north and east, but a lot of cloud around, so temperatures aren't really dipping tonight, but we could see some mist and fog patches develop where we see the clearest skies. As we go through Bank Holiday Monday, then we've got a few watch points, especially across the southeast England. As we start the day, we've got outbreaks of rain that could turn quite heavy at times. Elsewhere, sunny spells, but also some showers breaking out. Again, some of these could be on the heavy side, turning dry across Northern Ireland, but rather cloudy. Temperatures around average, but in the sunshine, feeling warm with highs of 17 or 18. As we go through Tuesday, a drier theme. Many places starting off with some sunny spells, but also quite a lot of low cloud, especially across the northeast coast of England. And then through the day, some showers are going to be bubbling up, but high pressure is going to be dominating into next week. That will keep things a bit more settled, with temperatures also on the rise.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The next Great British Giveaway winner could be you, with a massive £20,000 in tax-free cash to be won. Imagine how you'd react getting that winning call from us.
Hi, my name's Phil Cox, and I won the Great British Giveaway. I'd say, why not? What is it? The price of a text and £2 to enter. And if I can win it, anybody can win it. And they're going to get even more money this time round, so why wouldn't you go in the draw?
For another chance to win £20,000 in tax-free cash, text PRIZE to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB05, PO Box 8690, Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 31st of May. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Nana Queer, weekends from 3 p.m.
J.K. Rowling has accused politicians of snuggling up to trans campaigners. The Harry Potter author has called for an investigation into why political parties are embracing the language of pro-trans groups. So is it time to ditch campaign groups such as those? Well, welcome again to my clashers. Former Labour Party advisor Matthew Laza, also businessman and activist Adam Brooks.
I think the Cass report is really welcome. I think there's been a huge amount of agreement, including from some trans rights campaigners, that there's an awful lot of good in the Cass report. I think that I'm more concerned about mermaids, which is currently under a Charity Commission investigation, and some of the reports, if they're to be believed, like sending out chest binders, are more alarming. I think on Stonewall, which has done such great work over the past 30 years on LGBT rights.
It said 2-year-olds could be trans. Now, that is one of the most horrifying things I read today. Actually, J.K. Rowling tweeted that out there. To say that a 2-year-old can think that they can be another gender when my 4-year-old still thinks she's Elsa on some days. You know, there's no common sense, and to me it's
very badly phrased. I agree.
It's very sinister that these people actually believe that these kids want to change gender, and unfortunately out there are parents that almost see a trans kid as a fashion accessory now, and I think this whole agenda has pushed on people that this is normal to change gender, and we have to push back. And as I said earlier, To be trans is not normal.
Well, I don't agree with that
extreme.
phrasing. I think it's a big step, Adam, but there are clearly people throughout history who have been
But it's
trans.
not normal behaviour, is it?
I think as far as children are concerned, children need to be given the space to explore the world, and that can include experimenting with, breaking previous gender stereotypes. That doesn't mean that people should be sort of labelled at the age of 2, which I completely disagree with.
Good evening. You're watching and listening to GB News. I'm Sam Francis.